Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday, where we all tag each other and talk about random bookish type stuff. One of the nice things about tags is that it is random, so you don't know what kind of curveballs you're going to get, and that's fun. Gets you thinking about books in new ways. I ordinarily look on Tag Tuesday wistfully from the sidelines because I'm a well-known outcast on BookTube, a leper, a pariah, so nobody tags me. But all of a sudden, I have a bonanza of tags that I've been tagged in. So I'm going to try and get enough of them done. The first one I want to do is the This or That People April tag. This is a tag created by Elizabeth at Bouquins and Books and Roz at Scallydandling About the Books to go along with their BookTube event, People April. The event that dare not call itself People. And it's all about life writing. Memoirs, letter collections, autobiographies, full dress biographies. It's a wonderful event. It's one of my favorite kinds of reading to do. And the two of them have worked up a wonderful tag, and as far as I can tell, both of them tagged me. So let's go through these and talk a little about biography, shall we? It's all either or type picking. What's your preference? So choice number one is big, fat, and detailed biographies or short and succinct biographies. I, of course, love big, fat biographies, huge volumes. Part of that is personal. It doesn't have anything to do with the kind of the job the writer is doing, and it isn't restricted only to biographies. Part of that is just personal because I read really fast. Really fast. I don't speed read. Some of you who are new to the channel have suggested that. I don't speed read, but I read really fast. And that usually precludes me from a feeling that we all like as readers, which is to be sort of lost in a book, wrapped up in a book. That's a wonderful feeling. And when you're flying through a book, like Grape Shot, you don't feel that. You're done before you're over, before you're close to feeling that. But a huge book of any kind will make me feel that way. Even if it's a bad feeling, even if the book is bad, most books are bad, and most long books are bad. But nevertheless, when it comes to biography, you have great examples on total other end of the spectrum. Like think of Douglas Southall Freeman. You won't think about him, of course, because he's a historian from a previous generation, so you won't remember his name. But he wrote a 4-volume biography of the arch traitor and slave owner, Robert E. Lee. A huge thing. That won, I think it won him the Pulitzer Prize. It was certainly all anybody could talk about. It was the Lee reading experience for a 10-year period. And Douglas Southall Freeman is a fantastic writer. I'm sorry that he wasted so much of his energy and so much of his personal admiration on such a loathsome figure. Someone who should have been killed out of hand like a rabid dog at Appomattox Courthouse. I'm sorry that he wasted all of that effort on such a figure, but nevertheless, his 4-volume Lee biography is incredible. It's an incredible reading experience. And it's huge. It's 3,000 pages, more than that if you put them all together. And on the other end of the spectrum from that is the humorist writer Roy Blount, who is not a historian at all, and who wrote an entry on Robert E. Lee for the old Penguin Live series, these tiny little books, no more than 120 pages. And Blount's biography of Robert E. Lee for that series is fantastic. It's one of the best books they did. So, you've got the two ends of the spectrum there in terms of, in other words, what I'm saying is if I have a preference here, it's certainly only going to be personal. It's not going to be, I'm not going to say or even slightly imply that you need the extra space to tell that story, to tell a story correctly. You don't, obviously. There are great short biographies. Then choice number 2 is celebrity memoirs or average Joe memoirs. I don't particularly like celebrity memoirs. They are mostly just heavily vetted lies. And the lie extends right to the name on the cover because the celebrity is a dumb cokehead, so they're not writing their own book. On almost no occasions are they doing that. And most of the time they're not even aware of it. They just know they've got a book out. And so they'll do a little publicity for it. They'll go on Merv Griffin or Johnny Carson, tanked to the gills, and talk about some anecdotes that may or may not be contradicted in the book. Celebrity memoirs can be fun, I guess, in a way, especially if you get a celebrity that takes it seriously. They're not going to write it, but they might visit with the author more often than just once. But on the other hand, you've got memoirs by nobodies. I understand the phrasing here because I don't get that at all. And it's extremely popular. It's become unbelievably popular in the age of social media, because social media has given every single person in the world what the kids on TikTok refer to as main character syndrome. They mean it as a negative, like someone else should be the main character of your life. But they call it main character syndrome because they're assuming there's an element of vamped up melodrama involved in what is a boring life. I mean, I follow as many people on Instagram as the next person, and I see the shaping that's going on here. I see the lying that's going on here. Your life is mostly boring. But you're trying to give the impression that it's mostly exciting, and that's obviously a lie. So when it comes to books, I think about the thing about an ordinary Joe memoir is that something interesting has to have happened to that person. Otherwise, no. Otherwise, it's just Instagram. Something interesting has to have happened to you, and then maybe you can write a book. Although, even in cases like that, the interesting thing is the only thing we want to read about. What you should really write is a New Yorker article, and not a book, because we're not going to care about your grade school, your grade school years. Nevertheless, we're going to get them. I think of Alex Messenger here. His book, The 29th Day, from a few years ago. If I can remember, I'll leave a link to my review. I think I'm blurbed on the book, even though my review was mostly negative. It was a perfect example of what I talk about sometimes on this channel, where a publicist they'll want your name on the book, and so they will very carefully pick and massage their way through your review to make it sound like you like the book. I'm pretty sure that was done with my blurb on The 29th Day. But it's the story of an ordinary guy, an ordinary young guy. He's good looking, he's fit and trim, and he and his good looking, fit and trim friends go on an extended camping tour. And they're out in the middle of nowhere. They're catching their supper out of the rivers. They're camping at night and having the time of their lives, stories to tell their grandchildren, etc., etc. And then Messenger goes off away from his friends just to wander around on a plateau, on a bit of plain. He's not within easy hailing distance of them. So mistake number one. But he gets out onto this stretch of plain and surprises a grizzly bear. And you might think, well, if it's a stretch of plain and there are no hills or mountains, then no forest, how could he do that? Believe me, you can do that. Believe me, you can. These things look like rocks, or they don't look like they're there at all. And then suddenly they sit up on their haunches and see you. And then it's just a question of what they feel like doing. That's all. It's not a question of what you feel like doing. It's a question of what they feel like doing. You don't trust me. You don't have a firearm on you that could hurt them. And this kid didn't have a firearm at all. Even if he had one, he wouldn't have had, unless he was carrying a cannon, he wouldn't have had a firearm that would have hurt this thing. And grizzly bears weigh 600, 700 pounds. They're strong enough to tip over a truck. They're faster than a horse when they get up to full speed. It's a very, very bad thing for you to have happen to you what happened to this kid. Whereas he's wandering around, suddenly he's face to face with a grizzly bear, and the grizzly bear eventually attacks him and mauls him, but doesn't kill him, and wanders off, which grizzlies will sometimes do, especially young grizzly bears. I don't remember from the book if the bear was young, but young grizzlies will sometimes do that. They just want to put you in your place. They don't want to eat you. Maybe because they haven't gone through enough hungry times. They're a lot choosier in what they eat. The kid eventually wakes up, and Messenger is eventually able to crawl back to his friends. And then all of a sudden, of course, the trip is completely different, because now they've got to race to get him to help before he dies or goes septic or whatever. In a case like that, or there are a bunch of other books like that, it's unbelievably unlikely that anything interesting has ever. Certainly, I know from the book that nothing interesting happened to Alex Messenger before then, and it's extremely unlikely that anything will happen after that, unless he's dumb enough to be incautious a second time and get attacked again by a grizzly bear. Otherwise, no, he's just going to live an ordinary life. So he wrote a book, a memoir. It definitely fits for People April, but he's an ordinary Joe who just had something extraordinary happen to him that he managed to live through. So I guess if in terms of a preference, there's more going on to interest me in a celebrity memoir. Even though it's not the celebrity telling the story, there's still more of interest there than just the one bit for something like The 29th Day. Then choice number 3 is complete correspondence or selected letters. Well, there's selected letters and there's selected letters, right? Young people born in the 21st century, will not have any real conception of what complete correspondence would actually look like. Even volumes that call themselves complete correspondence are not. They are not. They are not including practical quotidian correspondence of the type that we all did every day. I had at my desk for 45 years, I had 2 stacks of mail that I sorted ahead of time. And it was when it was time to work, when I pulled in my chair and it was time to fill the outgoing box with stuff, well, I had a pad of letter writing paper if it was something I could write. I had my typewriter right there if it was something I had to type. And they were strictly categorized. This is business and it's totally impersonal. I'm disputing a bill or something like that. This is business, but it's not totally impersonal. I'm corresponding with an editor. It's all very factual. I'm not trying to waste an editor's time, but it can't be handwritten. It has to be typed, but it's not completely quotidian. There are personalities involved. And then there's the personal, which mostly will be handwritten. I will want a copy for myself. And when you're talking complete correspondence, who in the world would want the actual complete correspondence? No one would. In other words, most of the volumes that I've seen in my life that say complete correspondence are not that. They are selected correspondence. What I worry about with selected is the ones that are curated. Those bother me. In the situation that I describe, and every single person that did correspondence had that same breakdown, you probably don't want any of the first kind. I mean, if the figure is incredibly important, if it's Shakespeare or Jane Austen, maybe you want a quick note that she tossed off to the baker or the sausage maker, but probably not. And certainly not in the day of regular postage. So this, the middle of the 20th century onward, that would be 10 volumes, and there wouldn't be anything interesting in it at all. You probably want some of the second kind of impersonal, the letters to the editor, letters to prize boards or publishers, fellow authors, but on a completely professional level. And then you want all of the third kind, the personal kind. You want all of that, and you want that heavily annotated. And what you want to do, it won't be a complete correspondence, but a good selected correspondence will be a huge amount of those second two, with almost nothing from the first one unless it has personality. And it usually won't. For every one line that Mark Twain wrote to the electric company that had personality, it had a Twain quip. So the electric company right away saved it, and it was been anthologized ever since. He wrote thousands that didn't have anything like that. So I would say selected, but only with that understanding in mind. Then choice number 4 is memoirs written when the events are fresh or memoirs written with hindsight. It depends. It depends. If the memoirs written with hindsight are written with a hindsight that distorts, then that gets my vote. that definitely gets my vote, because that's a lot more fun. Choice number 5 is gossipy biographies or scholarly biographies. And the question here, the real issue that this whole choice hinges on, is storytelling. And I've made my position in April, very clear on this point, on storytelling, especially in biography and especially in history. A lot of people who are practitioners of those two genres think, well, if it's titillating, what was the word? Gossipy. If it's gossipy and titillating, then it won't be accurate. In other words, if it's interesting, it won't be accurate. So if I'm accurate, then I probably shouldn't be interesting. And that is wrong. A boring book is a bad book. That's as simple as that. A boring book is a bad book. A boring book is when you are, as an author, are presuming that your reader owes you attention. Nothing could be further from the truth. Your reader doesn't owe you anything. Nothing at all. You are everything to them. They're paying for your mortgage. So you are everything to them. It's your job to show up and be interesting. It's your job to, what do you want me to do? Dance? Yeah, I want you to dance. And if you don't, I'm going to go elsewhere. As simple as that. A boring book is a bad book. So when you say the difference between a gossipy biography or a scholarly biography, I think you're talking about readability. Unless you're talking about accuracy. But obviously nobody's going to prefer to read a book if they know for sure that it's not accurate, right? Nobody's going to want to do that. Outside of MAGA, no one's going to want to do that. So what, if we're assuming a baseline accuracy here, then what we're talking about here is interest level. We're talking about storytelling ability. And a big scholarly biography should be interesting to read. If it's not, I don't care how good its scholarship it is. It's still a bad book. Let's see here. Choice number 6 is Diaries of Ordinary Life or Diaries of Extraordinary Events. Well, it gets back to the celebrity memoirs versus average Joe memoirs. I don't know of any diaries that are just extraordinary events, but oftentimes, if you keep a regular diary, then extraordinary events will be in your diary. And I like a good larding of ordinary events on either side of those spikes in order for me to judge how much I can trust the person. An extraordinary, when an extraordinary event happens, I want to know if I should be paying attention to you when you write about it. So I guess what I want is a healthy mix here. Choice number 7 is arty memoirs or sporting memoirs. Not sure what the dichotomy going on here is, but I don't particularly like arty memoirs. If by arty we mean pretentious, then I can't stand it. And sporting memoirs are not free from pretension. Trust me, they are not. Especially baseball memoirs. Oh my God! But it's pretension in a different way. It's pretending to be a common man, or that you ever got into the game for common man instead of for steroids and free sex. That's just a different kind of pretension. It's still pretension. You're still trying to pull one over on me. But if we're not talking about that, if we're just talking about subject matter, the art world versus the sports world, I have no preference whatsoever. Then choice number 8 is gritty autobiographical writing or inspirational autobiographical writing. Inspirational autobiographical writing tends to make me throw up, so I'm going to go with gritty. Choice number 9 is biographies of historical figures or biographies of contemporary figures. I prefer historical figures, obviously. The more historical a figure it is, the more context there is. A lot of times, in most cases, the more settled the research is, which is important. I mean, what good, it might be interesting, but what good would an 800-page biography of Oprah be right now? With God knows how much not known, how much covered by NDAs and whatnot, how much not settled in any way. What good would that be compared to an 800-page biography of Oprah written outside of America, obviously, in 25 years or 40 years? I would much prefer that. I especially don't like, I mean, I do it, but I don't like biographies of people who are still alive. Because there, the dust hasn't even begun to settle. The dust is still swirling in the air. And choice number 10 is memoirs of happy days or memoirs of tragic days. I've read great examples of both. Little books like, The Egg and I or Presidents and Pies or things like that, The Farmer Takes a Wife. Little happy memoirs can be wonderful fun. And then I've read tragic memoirs, the Diaries of Victor Klemperer. I don't get much more tragic than that. I get a lot of enjoyment out of both. I certainly don't have a preference one way or another. I hate to be a broken record here, but I really care only about how it's done. Whether or not it's respecting me, whether or not it's, blatantly lying, and a footnote will tell me that, or a second's Googling will tell me that. I really care about how it's done, rather than whether or not it's upbeat. And then there's a bonus prompt here. The Complete Diary of Samuel Pepys, over 4,000 pages, or selections from the Diary of Samuel Pepys, which can be as short as 120 pages. And again, Pepys is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. People fetishize his unabridged diaries. They come in multi-volume sets, and I've known book people who are inordinately proud of their unabridged Pepys. You don't have the abridged, do you? Pepys is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Huge swaths of his diary are utterly useless entries. Went downriver, spent 16 pence, came back home, turned in early. No interest whatsoever. None at all, except maybe to a historian of finance, commerce. Maybe a biographer of Pepys, but you're not a biographer of Pepys. You're a reader of Pepys. And there's a huge chunk of his diary that is like that. The big, fat volume by Robert Latham, The Shorter Pepys, It came out as a big fat hardcover, and then it was adapted. It is now the Penguin Classic Shorter Peeps. That is everything. Latham knew these books inside and out. He did not leave anything interesting out of that bigger volume. And that's a whole lot more amenable than a whole shelf of Peeps. It's some of those, I mean, the latest unabridged Peeps, the scholarship in every one of those individual volumes, the volumes were set up by year, the 10 years he kept his diary. And the scholarship in some of those volumes, in all those volumes, is just amazing. Just amazing. But how often are you going to go to that scholarship? And surely the point of reading Pepys' diary is to read Pepys' diary, not to read the scholarship about it. Now, a one-volume abridgment of Pepys is just fine. A one-volume abridgment of almost anybody is just fine. But anyway, this is that People April tab. The only thing left to do is tag people. But I don't know who reads biographies. And I also don't know who would feel comfortable or not being tagged, or being tagged by me. So I'm going to punt. In all my tags, I'm going to punt to the lame ass, if you want to do this, if you read biographies and want to do this, I urge you to do it. People April is going strong. I've dropped the ball in the last couple of days, but I'm going to come back. This tag is my reclaiming ground. I will be talking about biographies quite a bit for the rest of the month. So thanks very much to Elizabeth and Roz for tagging me. They must have done it with a little bit of trepidation, tagging me, not so much because I'm a leper, an outcast, a pariah, but maybe out of fear of communicating the curse of People April. I don't know if you've been following their videos, but it looks like People April might be the only booktube event that is legitimately cursed. And maybe they were worried that, maybe they want to curse me. I don't know. I don't know. I did 15 years with a gassy, insane Basset-hound. I think I've used up a lot of my curse momentum. But if you want to do this and you're not afraid of the curse of people, feel free to do it. I'd love to hear your answers. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.